Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated loving memory of Dennis Dayan, alav Hashem l'nishmat Shlomo ben Moshe Mazal Dayan, sponsored by his son Murray. Tenishmato Eden. Also dedicated for the refuah shlema v'lo Shlomo ben Mazal Fortunem and the continued health of Chanabat Simafega. The learning this week is dedicated by the Torah Center Silver donors Eli and Jordana Kraser in celebration of the birth of their daughter Anael Kraser. And the breakfast in the class for this year is dedicated in loving memory Nishmat Ruth Orfali Bat Adela, sponsored by her family. Okay, did I get them all? I got them all. We also want to wish Mazal Tov and Mabruk to Irving and Francine Shabbat on the birth of two baby girls that we named this past week in the Beit Knesset, twin girls, and to the Brit Milah for the Low and Demagi families that was this past Sunday. So Baruch Hashem, we've got beautiful semachot happening in abundance to Podolsky and Harosh family. Also Brit Milah this past week. Shtabach Shemo. Further and further and further, all we need is more and more and more semachot. So let's go, guys, get busy. Okay, says the Torah, we opened up a new book. Ve'ele Shemot B'nei Yisrael. These are the names of the B'nei Yisrael, Haba'im Mitzrayim, that are coming down to Egypt. And it lists the names of all of the Shivatim. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, beautiful. Ibn Ezra, Ramban, everyone gets busy trying to understand why we needed to revisit these the names of the tribes. We just were finished talking about them last week. We don't have such short memory, even though we all are a little bit ADD. We remember that last week, previously, on Bible, right, you had Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. We know who they are. Why does the Torah need to revisit the names of the Jewish people again? On the spot, Rashi, in dealing with this question, Rashi answers that the reason is that God wanted to show us how much He loved us. And like you have a guy who's got, some precious diamonds in his pocket. He'll pull them out every once in a while, look at them, make sure they're all there, right? You know that guy. You have a guy who's got stocks in the market. He's constantly opening the account, just checking it all out, seeing where they're all. Even if he doesn't think, he didn't hear anything, he's just double checking, triple checking. Guy logs into his Chase account, looks at the same number, logs out, right? The guy wants to make sure. In fact, struck a nerve there, right? In fact, the Gemara says in Masechet Baba Metzia that if a person has money in his pocket and it falls out of his pocket, you're allowed to keep that money. You know why? Because regular thing a guy loses, he doesn't know yet that he lost it, so he doesn't give up on it. So you picked up something that the guy did not give up on yet. Still belongs to him. When it comes to money, Adam mimashmesh bikiso, a person feels his pockets b'chol sha'ah. He's checking his wallets there. Especially in New York, you have to double check, right? All the muggings going on, right? You gotta always check. And therefore, if you found money on the floor, we could assume the guy already checked, already noticed it's gone, already gave up hope on it because he lives in New York. That's called, what's it called? Yush midat, not shalom midat. Because there the guy knows. He knows he lost it because he checked. My friends, for some people, the most important thing is their wallet. And they're constantly checking. How often are you checking in on your kids tells you how much you care about your kids. And you can stop lying to yourself and say that you're not checking because you trust them and you want to give them space. You can stop with that already. We're here. We're amongst friends. If you keep checking on the Chase account, you could also keep. I'm not saying you need to install cameras on that. I'm not saying we need to invade their life, but maintaining those things about things that are important. Gotta tell you, Rabbi, I die for Judaism. Really? How often you come to shul? Once a year. I understand why. You don't like dying so much. So he doesn't like to die for Judaism. Comes once a year. Right? People tell you things, but their actions don't back up what they say. And by the way, I don't think the guy's a liar. I think he actually thinks that he actually would die I think he thinks that. People tell you, my kids are everything to me. My parents, forget about it. Can't breathe. Meanwhile, but their actions don't back up their thoughts and their feelings. we kind of think that the thought itself, the feeling is enough. Rashi says, you know why the Pasuk counts the Jewish people again? To tell you how much Hashem loves them, that every moment he counts the Jews. If something goes wrong, he counts the Jews. How many are left? If something goes right, he counts the Jews. How many did he give birth to? If Heke, just Thursday afternoon, he's counting the Jews. My friends, that's Rashi's approach. Ramban, Ibn Ezra, each have their own understandings about what's going on over here. But I'd like to perhaps ask that question that's being asked by all three, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, Ramban, and maybe take a little bit of a different perspective on this. Let me ask you a simple question. Let's say we're going to go with Rashi. Why are we starting the book with counting the Jewish people? Why? To show you how much Hashem loves the Jewish people. I get it. But you're telling me that we're going to start a book and give the book the name of an irrelevant detail before we started? What's the book of Shemot about? I mean, in English, I think they nailed it. Exodus. How would you say Exodus in Hebrew? Yetziah, Geulah. What's the book of Shemot? What should it be called? Geulah. So I can see you already cooking. Joey's giving me like squinty eyes. He's like, Because really, not only does it incorporate Geulah, being taken out of exile, it also tells us about going in. That's what you're thinking, right? See, I know. Okay? So maybe you want to call the book Galut. Maybe you want to call the book Geulah. Maybe you want to call the book Galut to Geulah. I don't know what you want to do. But you want to call it names? Something that takes up 3 Pesukim in the beginning? For whatever the reason is. It's a strange thing. Have you ever thought about that? Shemot is a weird name for the whole book of Exodus. So, I think that there's a beautiful answer to this question. We can't call it Geulah because there's Galut. We can't call it Galut because there's Geulah. There's one thing that we know, and that is whether we're in Galut or we're in Geulah, we know that Hashem loves us. We've discussed this idea many times before. What is the root of the word Geulah and what is the root of the word Galut? The Sfarim tell us is the same root. Gimel Lamed. What does Gimel Lamed mean? Gal. Gal could mean a wave. But the Pasuk in Tehillim says, Gal enai ve'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Gal enai means open my eyes. So both Galut and Geulah open our eyes. Both the good times in our lives and the bad times open our eyes. Our eyes are opened in happy times with how much love we have for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And our eyes are opened in sad times when we forgot maybe God a little bit. We have an eye-opening moment. But in either scenario, the idea is that Galut and Geulah share the same purpose. For our eyes to be open to Hashem. For us to recognize how much He loves Am Yisrael and what He's willing to do for us to be able to survive as a people. Sometimes survival requires, going out to eat for dinner, celebrating because everything's going well. And sometimes survival means cutting out something that's cancerous, changing something, a habit. When you take a smoker and you grab his cigarettes from him, the withdrawal symptoms for a person who's smoking for decades, you know what it feels like for that person? You take an alcoholic, a drug addict, and you handcuff him to the radiator. The withdrawal symptoms, the sweating, the fever, hallucinations, vomiting, it's unbelievable. The body has gotten so used to this thing that not having it causes the body to have such pain and such withdrawal. It's a physiological thing. It's not psychological. The body is craving something that it has learned to need. And I promise you, when you take an addict like that and you take the stuff away from him, he's cursing your name under his breath. Look at what you're doing to me. The worse the drug, the worse the withdrawal. Bar minan, no one should ever see. Just so we understand how crazy this is, if you have a mother, bar minan, who's a cocaine addict, when she gives birth to the baby is born into this world as a cocaine addict. And if you don't give the baby cocaine, the baby will die. Did anyone, you understand this? So what do they do in the hospitals? They actually give the baby a different form of drug. I think it's actually based on meth. They give the baby small doses of meth in order to wean the baby off in a way where they'll be able to do it. So you see, sometimes pulling someone off of something that will kill them will kill them. But you have to figure out how to drag the person away, kicking and screaming, from the thing which is causing them so much damage. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Jewish people, you're about to go into a bit of a roller coaster. And I know in the end, you'll be singing my name. Ashir al Adonai, ki ga'o ga'a, sus ve'rochvo, rama v'ayam. I know in the end, when I take you out, when I split the seas, you'll be screaming my name, saying how much you believe in me. V'yaminu ba'amonai, u'moshe avdo. But I want you to know, before you go down into Galut, remember how I counted you individually, by name, each one. Ele Shemot B'nai Israel. God's love is ever present. God's love is all encompassing. And therefore the name of the book is Shemot. But my friends, I want to add a couple of layers on top of this idea. If our core question is, why would we name the book of Exodus Shemot? I would remind you of the words of the Midrash. The Midrash says that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they had almost no merits. But first of the merits that the Jewish people did have in order to leave Egypt was Shelo Shinu Et Shemam. They did not change their names. They had Jewish names. Which is why it's so hard for me to hear people give their kids names that are not Jewish. Last week we read about Yaakov Avinu saying to Ephraim and Manasseh, almost like prophetically, saying to them, "Hamalach hagoel oti mikora," the angel that kept me from all evil, hu yivarech et hane'arim, he should bless all of my children and grandchildren, all my future generations. Vikareh bahem shemi v'shem abotai, and they should call their children in my name and in the names of my fathers. We should have Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov's, Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo's, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Hannah, Esther, Miriam, Abigail. These should be the names of our children. And the Torah is telling us something that it wanted us to remember throughout all of history. It teaches us the first time we were exiled. Remember who you are. Ve'ele Shemot B'nai Israel. Why do we have to have a Hebrew name? Why is it so important? It's not just because you have to have a Hebrew name. It goes so deep, it cuts so deep, that a person, I don't know if you've ever had this before, if a person is sleeping and you whisper their name, they wake up. There's a sense of identity that ties a person to the name that they're called. And Moshe, and Yaakov understood that when the Jewish people would be in Greece, and they would be in Rome, and they would be in Egypt, and they would be in Syria, and they would be in Iraq and Iran, and Poland and Russia and Germany, when they would be surrounded by every culture under the sun, he wanted the Jews to remember that they were different and they were Jewish. And what does that more than if all day long, all you hear is Abraham, Abi, Joey, Jack. These are the names. The problem with Jack is that the guy next to you is also called Jack. He's Christian. Guy next to you is also called Joe, and he's Christian. So Yosef, Abraham, Yaakov, the Hebrew name, even more. So I just want you to understand, a lot of times now in the Beit Knesset, people go up to the Sefer Torah. Stephen Batesh, Alan Fallis, Jack Beta, Hadje. No. I make every person who goes up to the Torah in this synagogue, I make them tell me, what's your name? Yaakov. Yaakov ben what? Yaakov ben Moshe. That's who you are. If it doesn't happen in the office, at the very least it can happen at the Torah, which asks you to have that name. If that name gets called, thrown at you enough times, you tell yourself, I'm a Yosef, I'm a Shlomo, I'm a Moshe, I'm a David, I'm Aharon. And then you act that way. So the Torah is telling us, I believe, a second layer. You know what it was that was going to get the Jews out in the end? What we started with in the beginning. Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Israel. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, etc. One last piece that I think is important. Our Torah, I think, is hinting to us also in the pasuk itself. Ve'ele Shemot. The Vav in the beginning of a sentence always expresses what's called Vav HaHibur. And Ramban goes to town on what the Vav HaHibur is teaching us. Why did you need to say, and these were the names of the Jews? Why don't you start by saying, these were the names of the Jews. Ele Shemot b'nei Israel. What is the Vav HaHibur? And my friends, I believe that this is the last piece. The last piece is that Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, Gad Asher, right? Dan, Naphtali, Yosef, Binyamin. They were who they were in Israel. But then they went down to Egypt. And the Torah is telling you, and these are their names. Vav, and, always connects to the sentence before. This is who they were before. This is who they are now. It was Reuven in Israel on the streets of Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim. And it was Reuven in the streets of Cairo, in the streets of Sharm el Sheikh, right? In the streets of what's the city down at the bottom? Of Dabo? What's the name of it? Taba. Same Reuven. But not only that, it was the same Reuven when Yaakov Avinu was alive and they stood around his bed in the last week's parasha, where every kid is sitting there looking at the crown of the Jewish people and thinking, as their father gives them musar, Reuven, this is who you need to be. Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. It was the same Reuven that we just saw around the bed. That's the Reuven, the beginning of Shemot. One of the most powerful things that a person can achieve in their life is to have a sense of stability. You have people who rise sky high. And everyone's so impressed. Wow, look at this person. But Judaism, and indeed anything in this life, is not most healthily experienced in peaks and valleys. It's in achieving a steady line. That level of consistency is what allows for something to stay. For Reuven to not be moved by the death of his father, to spike and then go nowhere and crash. It's not for Shimon or Levi or Yehuda to do great when they're in Israel for their gap year in yeshiva or in seminary. I used to hate this. People would say, when they come back from yeshiva or seminary, spend the year in Israel, they need a year, like to decompress, like to get normal, like to be normal again. Bust the bubble of Israel. I said, really? Maybe the year in Israel was busting the 20-year bubble of Brooklyn. Who told you which is the bubble? The question a person has to ask themselves is, not who would I want to be for 5 minutes, but who do I want to be for 50 years? And that unchanging, consistent person is a person that maintains their values no matter what the weather outside, no matter what the temperature. I wear my wool tzitzit in the summer and in the winter. You know why? Because I believe you're obligated to wear wool tzitzit. Does it matter if it's 100 degrees or 20 degrees? No. If you have to be a nice person, does it matter if you suffered a loss at work? If now you're talking to somebody, now you could be an animal? No. This is what I have to be. It's not about anything around me, it's about me. This is who I am. A shem of a person in Judaism represents their true essence. And therefore the Torah tells us, it bears witness. Ve'ele shemot b'nei Yisrael, haba'im mitzrayma. The ones who came to Egypt are the ones that were in Egypt. But my friends, what the tribes got right, their sons did not. And slowly but surely, the only thing left of them was their Hebrew names, their Hebrew language. Shelo shinu et shemam, lishonam, malbusham. They didn't change their clothing, their names, and their language. At the very least, even if those things are not mitzvot, at the very least they cut to the form of identity. So my Mr. I feel very Jewish, even though it's not what I would want, it's still beautiful and precious. Because it was enough to get the Jewish people out of Egypt. It was enough to make the person who's American realize when America turns on his Jewish identity, that even though I am so proud to be American, I also have this other part to me. And I can't stomach when the party I gave my life to turns anti-Israel. And that's what we witnessed over the last year and a half. And lifelong Democrats are asking themselves, what am I doing in this party? Now ask that guy, what do you do that's so Jewish? Nothing really, I love Israel. What do you do that's so Israel? I have to go, I haven't been in like 10 years. How you become such a one-issue voter over something that you can't even be bothered to visit in 10 years? How many times have you been to Miami in the last 10 years? How many times have you gone to other destinations? You can't even be bothered to go there. How is it so dyed in the wool? The answer is, that's Shemot B'nai Israel. At the very least, a strong Jewish identity will stop the person before they go off the cliff. The problem is that whatever is good enough and works for us almost never works for the generation after us. And that's been the scary part of history. Because whatever we hold, if we've got 90% of what our dads gave us, then our children get 80%. And their children get 70%, and 60, and 50, and eventually, there's no recognition at all. So my friends, this is something that a person needs to consciously double down on. Whether it's in terms of identity in the home. Someone asked me the other day, Rabbi, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable wearing my kippah. What should I do? Do I have to wear it? I said to him, you don't have to wear it, but you also don't have to live here. If you are in a place where you don't feel comfortable enough to be the person that you are, then you have some serious questions about where you should be living. If you feel comfortable enough there, fadal. Now, it's not by everybody is it about a kippah. But if you're scared to be a Jew, either wear it out or leave. Because otherwise, the more we hide these things, remember, if we've got X plus whatever, our kids have X minus. And that reality, that as you're straining it down through the ages, it gets less and less, is something that every generation needs to correct for. And in order to correct for it, one of the most important things that you could do is include your children in the Jewish things that you do. Guy's thinking, I need to get more connected, so he's going to shul, he's learning more. He's giving more to the JNF. He's flying an Israeli flag. Yeah, but what is that doing with his kids out in Saratoga? What's happening with them? So figure out how to include the children in all of those things that you're doing to retain your Hebrew name, your Jewish name. There used to be a song. The song was one of those songs that's kind of a dystopian because it's like such a happy tune. It's about a man who lives on a block, and he's a Jewish guy. He changes his name. Well, he'd long since gone and changed his name. It was the only way that he could play the game with the neighbors like the Richardsons, the Williams, and the Jones. What could he do with a name like Cohn? But he remembered his father. He used to light colored candles on the window for the menorah. He remembered that. Anyway, his kid comes home from school, and she has an Xmas tree, and she says, I want one. His wife said, what are we going to do? And he tells his daughter, listen, he remembers his father. He says, Sue, there's something better than a tree. Okay? I still remember my father doing it. He comes home from work with a menorah in his hand. His dear wife said to him, Joe, I just don't understand. We've worked so hard to get to where we are today, and now what will we do? What will the neighbors say? He lit those candles anyway. Yes, there were 5 that night. From the window to the street glowed the candlelight. They were burning for an hour, maybe a little more, when suddenly Mr. Richardson stood there by the door. Would it be okay if it were to you? I'd say, there's something about those candles you must know. They bring back memories of my father I still see as he lit the candles many years ago. He looked outside later on that night, and boy, was he surprised. He couldn't believe what he saw, couldn't believe his eyes. From all the windows on the block glowed the candlelight. From their windowsills and out into the night. Every guy was pretending to be more non-Jewish than the next guy. Finally, some guy called Cohn, who changed his name to Mabaref, decides he's going to light the candles. Mr. Richardson's like, oh, fantastic, I'm in. Then what happens? Everyone's like, oh my gosh. Turns out the whole block was Jewish. Everybody's out wasping each other. Well, you going to mass? Me? I'm going to double mass. Judaism in America has taken a big hit. And now, post-October 7th, we're living in a little bit of a revival. We've been reminded And now, my friends, is the time where every single person can not only strengthen their own Jewish name, but can seek to reach out to the Mr. Richardsons, to the Williams and the Jones, to the people in your workplace, the people who you work with, that you meet. It's an unbelievable zechut. You might save them and their whole family's Judaism forever and ever by inviting the guy to one Friday night. By telling him, I know you're having trouble with your kids. There's a beautiful thing that we do every Friday night. Have your wife light the candles and say a little prayer to Hashem that the kids should turn out okay. They don't do anything, but they're lighting those candles. You brought something back. Ve'ele Shemot, that's our job as we go into dark times. It's our job as we come out of dark times. It's our job to be stable and to be strong in what we are, who we know, and through that we can get through anything. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Farhi.